Today I'm going to talk you through Carol Ann Duffy's wonderful poem, Anne Hathaway. This has to be one of my absolute favourite pieces. It's clever, it's funny, there's lots going on, there's an awful lot to write about. I hope I can help you to enjoy it as much as I do. Here in this first slide, I've just given you a copy of the poem, which I'm not going to read out because I assume you know it, but it's there for reference if you want to come back to it, just so you've got the whole poem in front of you. Anne Hathaway was the wife of William Shakespeare, who I'm sure we know was the world's most famous poet and playwright, and in this sonnet Duffy adopts the persona of the widowed Anne. The poem was originally published in a collection called The World's Wife, and in that collection Duffy imagines the roles of the wives of a number of famous men, Mrs. Midas, Mrs. Darwin. She looks at the men whose names have survived through history and reimagines the roles of the women behind them. And she does this here with Anne and makes her intelligent and literary and a woman to admire in her own right. Shakespeare wrote over 150 sonnets of his own, so it is quite subtle that this poem as a sonnet credits Anne Hathaway with being a poet, maybe not entirely Shakespeare's equal, but certainly on a par in terms of her own intelligence and creativity, and the fact that the recurring themes throughout the poem are the lovemaking that they shared as a couple, but also language, and that there are so many references to the cleverness of the English language all the way through it, makes it a really nice one to write about. Before you actually get to the 14 lines of the sonnet, you're given this little snippet from Shakespeare's will. I give unto my wife my second best bed. And this piece, if you're going to mention it in an exam answer, is referred to as an epigraph. It suggests the setting very strongly in terms of time, that if it's taken from Shakespeare's will, it's obviously referencing him and referencing the time when he was most recently dead, because people's wills, although they make interesting historical documents, tend to be read when the person has just died. It introduces the bed, which will be the central theme of the poem, and it also invites a little bit of historical interpretation. Traditionally, this is viewed as an insult to Anne Hathaway. Traditionally, the feeling is that she was a neglected wife and that Shakespeare had kind of moved on from her. But Duffy offers us the interpretation that rather than being insulting because he only leaves her the second best bed, that it's actually a compliment and a strongly romantic gesture because it was their bed, it was the bed that they shared as a married couple. And she makes this argument quite plausible and very appealing in the way that she constructs it. She introduces the bed, the central conceit, the central metaphor around which the whole sonnet is written, very cleverly in these opening lines, the bed we loved in. And that verb choice, we loved, not only is it, we would expect possibly the bed we slept in, so it's obviously a reference to their sex life, but it's also a nice choice of word in that the idea there is immediately one of affection and mutual affection. And it contradicts that accepted interpretation that this was an insult by immediately suggesting that the gift of the bed in his will was a romantic gesture. So she goes on to say that the bed was a spinning world of forests, castles, torchlight, cliff-tops, seas, where he would dive for pearls. The idea that it's metaphorically everything to them is encapsulated in the word world. The fact that it was their world, it was their be-all and end-all. The fact that it is spinning suggests that it and the lovemaking that happened there was something that made Anne dizzy, and that's an emotion or a state of mind that has multiple connotations. We talk about emotions as being dizzying if they're overwhelming, as well as literally being sort of off balance. And the list of settings, forests, castles, torchlight, cliff-tops, seas, evokes very strongly the settings of a number of Shakespeare's plays. If we think about Hamlet, set in the castle at Elsinore, if we think about forests, we've got Midsummer Night's Dream set in a forest, torchlight, cliff-tops, seas, we've got Twelfth Night, we've got The Tempest. There's definitely a sense of evoking the settings of his plays. where he would dive for pearls. He, although he hasn't been named at this point, is the protagonist in the poem. He is the centre of this world of hers. He is the centre of the action. And the idea that he is diving suggests that their lovemaking was immersive, and it again links back to the idea of it being their world, that together they are lost in this world and that they're totally absorbed in it and in each other. A pearl diver seeks treasure, and it suggests that their lovemaking was a beautiful thing and that moments of pleasure were of rich value to them. My lover's words were shooting stars which fell to earth as kisses on these lips. You've got a lovely double metaphor in these lines. She talks about his words being shooting stars as one metaphor, and then the fact that they fell to earth as kisses, and the words became stars, the stars became kisses. You get this lovely sort of double meaning. The shooting stars is the significance of his words. Shakespeare's plays and his sonnets and the words that he coined and the phrases that he gave to the English language suggest that his words, when he spoke them, were something of shooting star type importance. It's a rare blaze of glory, and that's what she's suggesting that his words were, but she's also linking that blaze of glory to the way that she felt when he kissed her. There's a sense of wonder, a sense that she felt perhaps privileged to be the recipient of those kisses. And then we move into one of the bits that's really clever in terms of language. My body now a softer rhyme to his, now echo, assonance, his touch a verb dancing in the centre of a noun. It's loaded with the words of English analysis, but one of the things I think is cleverest is that she talks about her body being a softer rhyme to his. And feminine rhyme is where you get the rhyming on the unstressed syllable at the end of a line, where masculine rhyme rhymes on the stressed syllable. So it's like the difference between sing and ring, but if you had singing and thinking, you've got the rhyme on the ing, and it's not quite as hard and conclusive as masculine rhyme. And it's so clever in that it fits the way she talks about her body responding to his. The two of them belonging together in the way that words that rhyme do, but the fact that she uses something quite sophisticated from the language of English analysis to express the masculinity and femininity of their bodies together, I think is just magic. She moves on with a triplet, so we've had the rhyme, and she gives us two other terms for rhyme. So echo and assonance, all three of them, that triplet talks about the idea of sounds that go together. His touch, a verb dancing in the centre of a noun. I think there's a lovely euphemism in there somewhere, which if you unpack it too carefully, I think you would spoil it. But it's the language of language. It's the language of analysis. She talks about him as a verb, maybe her as a noun. It's all just very Englishy and very appropriate for Shakespeare. Some nights I dreamed he'd written me, the bed a page beneath his writer's hands. These are two more beautifully clever lines. The fact that she dreams he'd written her suggests, I think, that he is a creative lover in the same way that he is a creative writer. And there's a sense in which he completes her as a woman. He makes her the woman that she is through his lovemaking. And maybe she dreams that she could be one of his heroines, somebody like Portia or Juliet, or maybe even that she was a kind of muse. She was the figure that inspired one of them. The idea that one of Shakespeare's heroines was based on her is quite a nice, loving fantasy to entertain. And then we get the synecdoche of the fact that his writer's hands are there to encapsulate the whole of the man. Appropriate because they are the hands that hold the pen, but they are also the hands that embrace and caress his wife. And then you've got this lovely hidden pun on a writer and the bed, because what's lingering unspoken at the back of all that is the idea of sheets. And it's bed sheets and sheets of paper. that he would write on one, and she's suggesting that he almost writes on the other. So you've got this lovely unspoken hidden pun in the lines. Romance and drama played by touch, by scent, by taste. She moves on with this lovely idea that their lovemaking is like a script that he has written, and that the senses, touch and scent and taste, become actors in their drama. Again, there's something lovely that's unspoken here, because there are 2 out of your 5 senses that aren't mentioned, and they are, of course, sight and hearing. And I like to think that there's a very valid explanation for that, which is that they don't include hearing because they're trying to be quiet about their lovemaking, and they don't include sight because it's dark. And the reason that they're being quiet is in that the other bed, the best, our guests dozed on, dribbling their prose. There's some lovely alliteration and assonance here. The bed, the best, our guests dozed and prose and dozed and dribbling. You've got lots of lovely sound work going on. But I love the fact that the whole point of the second best bed is just slipped into a parenthesis here. The other bed, the best. And that explains the whole idea of why Shakespeare's will left her his second best bed, because the other bed was the one that you kept for visitors. You kept the best to offer to guests. And it's logical, and it just makes sense of that snippet of his will in a way that's very charming. The guests who doze on, dribbling, it's an unattractive metaphor, and she contrasts the prose of what's going on in the bed next door with the obvious drama and poetry of what's happening in their bed. And she's obviously making a comparison that is not particularly flattering to the guests. And then my living, laughing love, and you get this lovely alliteration of the L's, the living, laughing love, that's almost like song or laughter, and creates this beautiful moment of memory. And then we get the Volta of the poem, where you change your perspective and you change your point of view. And although the whole of the poem up to this point has been in the past tense, and we have had the excerpt from Shakespeare's will at the beginning that reminds us that he is dead, there's something about the use of the word widow that's sudden and shocking and contrasts with this previous image of my living, laughing love, to remind us that this is all about the memories of a woman whose lover has died. And the fact that she holds him in this casket, she makes her head a casket, which is kind of ambiguous because a casket has 2 meanings. It's either a box that holds treasure. You wouldn't keep the crown jewels in any old cardboard box, you would keep them in a decorated casket. So it's the precious decorated box for holding treasures. But we do also use it as a word for a coffin. So it has those connotations of death lingering in the back of it as well. So there's the idea that she holds him, her head is like a casket that holds him because it holds her memories of him. Again, synecdoche, she uses her head to represent her whole being. It's where she holds her thoughts and her memories of Shakespeare. And she holds him as tenderly and as close as he held her upon that next best bed. And those 3 words very neatly conclude the ideas of the bed. It links back to the beginning of the poem where the bed was the first word that we started with, and it just encapsulates the tenderness and the memories and the nostalgia that is the whole point of this poem. And that, I do believe, is the end.